One dark night, a young lady standing near the window in her room is a little surprised, for in the window sits a nice-looking young man with black hair. The young lady asks who he is, but the guy only says how long he has been waiting to finally see her. The young man bends down to the main character and touches her chin. He once again says that finally this day has come, and he is happy to be able to greet the young lady. However, she is much younger than he expected. The guy claims he was going to take her with him, but perhaps he won't. He puts his hand on the protagonist's head and says that unfortunately it will have to wait a bit because it's still too early. He takes a lock of her hair and kisses her, which makes the young lady embarrassed. And the young man then pulls away and says that tomorrow he will also come. After that, he leaves the main character alone with her thoughts. The same morning, the young lady wakes up in her bed. She wonders if it was a dream, but then, when the maids begin to dress her, who realizes that no one could sneak into the palace unnoticed, and at least it is unlikely. After all, these romances have made her imagination run too wild. That same afternoon, a few hours later, in the square of the eastern city, there was the same young man. He welcomes the protagonist, and the girl from this is in complete shock. Young lady realizes that this is the same guy, and the brunette asks if he scared her. The main character doesn't even listen to him and thinks it must be fate. The Salbreed Empire, located in the eastern part of the central continent, and the Han Empire, which is located near the Western Sea on the eastern continent, have had a close relationship for centuries. Emperor Salbreed, like the Han Emperor, has a great interest in all the eastern lands. He has ordered his subordinates to explore the mysterious continent and discover its benefits to the empire. Margrave Myers is the Emperor's chief inspector. He is a key figure in diplomatic relations and personally appointed by the Emperor for his outstanding services. And the Margrave's main headache is his daughter, the rebel lady Nira Del Myers. A few people are whispering among themselves, one of them asking if the Lady Rebel has escaped after all. Another says that since his lordship is very protective of her, they are all keeping their mouths shut. But his colleague would know how the lady has been wearing him out in swimming lessons. Suddenly, someone comes up behind the guy and asks him how dare he talk like that. It turns out to be the main character. The servant immediately tries to justify himself, but he doesn't even know what to say. Then the young lady turns around and says that it doesn't matter, and she leaves, and the guys shouldn't say a word to their father. The protagonist realizes that they don't know anything about her, and they are talking behind her back. That same evening, Nira sits with the very same young man. She claims the fellow is quite fluent in the international continental language and asks if he is one of the Imperial Council. The young man claims that he doesn't need human knowledge and that the guy is just under the magic of communication. Nira thinks he speaks as if he is not human at all. 2 weeks have passed since their meeting, and not only his sudden appearance, but also the stories he told seemed strange to the girl. He told her about the deities that settled in all 4 parts of the world. They were called all-powerful guardians. He also told her how people worshipped them in the hope of being blessed, and all these stories, which were more like bedtime stories, he told as if he had been there at the saint's house. The girl thinks that if it had been anyone else, she would have just thought him old-fashioned, but to her surprise, the young lady was interested. And she's sure it's because of his captivating voice, or it could be all about his gaze. The protagonist thinks whether there was someone in her life who was so nice to her. Suddenly the guy turns to Nira and asks why she looks at him like that. The girl immediately turns around and cries out that it doesn't matter. She then says that she is just wondering if the guy is having a hard time spending time with her. The young man doesn't know what she's talking about, and the girl asks if he doesn't have other things to do. She has her dress on and thinks that she doesn't really know anything at all about this guy, even though it's been 2 weeks. The brunette claims that his main goal is to meet her, and that he spends a lot of time with the young lady. In its own way, it's important to him. The protagonist is a little touched by such words. She even gets embarrassed and says that she didn't mean it at all. The girl sighs and says that she wants to know who the young man really is. The boy only rises from his meat and asks to be allowed to introduce himself first. He picks up a sharp stone in his hands and starts drawing something on the floor. The brunette states that the first character of his name, C, is his element, and the second character is rules and principles. He is forced to carry this name and live by certain rules. The protagonist asks how the name is pronounced. The young man puts his finger to his lips and says his name is Hae-young. The young lady tries to pronounce the name, but she's not very good at it. The guy can't contain his laughter. He keeps repeating his name while the protagonist tries to pronounce it. But she still cannot succeed, which makes the guy laugh even more. The protagonist tells him not to laugh, and then says that her name doesn't make that much sense, but she takes a pebble and draws her name on the floor. Then says it out loud. The girl states her name is Nira Del Myers. Then the guy says it clearly and accurately. The girl sits back down and says that if she practices, she can do it too. And the boy says I'm in no hurry because they have plenty of time. He then states that the young lady's eyes are like the sea, and if you look from above, the sea will be under the clouds. Hae-young approaches her and says that if you look up from beneath the waves, it will seem as if the sea is washing the sky. That's when the young lady first experienced what it feels like when their lips touch in a kiss. In that moment, she came to one conclusion, and that is that she would either be with him or she would be with no one. Nira Del Myers. This is the Margrave's only daughter and his headache. After persuading her father to take her with him to the eastern continent, the girl arrived there as part of a diplomatic mission. Secretly from her father, she often escaped to obscure meetings, and soon rumors of her daughter's behavior reached the Margrave as well. The father shrieks that he repeats once again that her daughter must behave according to her status. The man asks how many more times he must be told that his daughter cannot be so careless, and there are already rumors that Lady Myers is, you see, in the company of an unknown man. The Margrave also asks if the girl will continue to behave in such a manner and dishonor her father, but the young lady only asks what she has done, and then claims that she has not done anything that would affect his reputation. Then the father says that she is right, and the young lady says that if she hadn't caught his eye in a hurry, none of this would have happened. The man, however, realizes that he should not have taken his daughter with him, but if he had left her the one even scary to rearrange to throw her out. Therefore, the blonde asks his daughter to behave properly, because he is unlikely to be able to settle everything there if something irreparable happens. The protagonist claims that her father speaks as if she had killed someone. The young lady comes closer to him and says that you'd think her father, not worried. The young lady picks up a vase from the dresser and immediately smashes it to pieces. The father is shocked by this. He cries out what the daughter is doing, and the girl just says that now at least she deserves to be reprimanded. After all, the father will settle everything there. The man shouts her name as if ordering her to calm down. But the young lady only asks with a smirk what is wrong, and if it is not enough, the man does not even know what to say and only looks at Nira fiercely. The protagonist says that in any case, he wouldn't dare to raise a hand on her. The young lady has never been truly punished in her entire life, and maybe her father doesn't want to waste his time on her at all, because by fulfilling all her wishes, they made life easier only for themselves. The protagonist thinks that he was afraid that Nira would take out all her resentment on them. The man protected all the others' video in the young lady, the main threat, and in her soul settled resentment because she also wanted his protection. But whatever the girl did, no one cared, and whatever she demanded, everything was fulfilled. The more the protagonist realized that the attitude to her somewhat different, the more she began to allow herself. As a child, she saw her father scolding her half-brother, and then he got all weepy and apologized, and the man hugged him. He apologized to his son for yelling and said that the little boy knew his daddy loved him, didn't he? But he had never spoken such warm words to Nira. The man only told her to step into the room, and the young lady realizes that he never even hugged her with such tenderness. The protagonist did not understand how she deserved such a thing and what she did wrong. After all, her father was forever saying that while her mother was alive, who cared nothing for her and the woman never hugged her. Nira thinks that maybe it would be better if she left with her mother. But suddenly her father turns to her and the young lady is startled to realize that she said it out loud. Nira immediately turns around and tries to run away, even though out of resentment she voiced her thoughts of wanting to leave this world with her mother. But she didn't want her father to know about it. The man excitedly cries out to Nira to wait, but the protagonist only in tears runs away from the estate. The girl realizes that the worst thing about this situation is that she really regrets being alive. Nira thinks that nobody cares about her, and she is like a walking problem in their eyes. But suddenly, the girl crashes into someone. It turns out to be Hae-young. He asks the young lady what happened. And why is she crying? The protagonist only says his name in tears, and the young man asks what happened. But Nira just keeps crying. However, suddenly her father cries out for the girl to wait. The protagonist looks at him with tears in her eyes, and then the brunette covers her eyes with his hand. He then asks what he should do. The young lady puts her hand over his and states that she wants to run away from there. Hae-ryong then says that he will. A moment later, he is already opening his eyes to the girl, and the young lady is a little surprised by that, because they really are in a different place. The brunette claims that this place immediately came to his mind. He tells his sweetheart to just tell him if she wants to go somewhere else. The young lady only approaches him and asks who he is. The girl thinks she doesn't know anything about him at all after all. She fell in love with a stranger who showed her tenderness and care. But he is always mysteriously silent, just asks a question about his life and only does what he tells legends. But the main character likes him, although the girl knows only his name. The time spent with him was filled with happiness. Until this moment, the lady with white hair thought that only this is important, because she fell in love only because she is happy next to him. But she is not left with a strange feeling, because the guy now does not seem to be a simple person at all. And it's as if he was like that from the very beginning, so the protagonist asks who he is. The guy thinks for a while and says that he was afraid that the young lady would not believe him. He claims he didn't want to hide anything at all, but the girl is still so young, so he didn't want to rush things, and things went well for a while. Nira realizes that he said the same thing to her the first time they met, and if he wasn't trying to hide something from her, then that gentle whisper of his to Nira was sincere. The brother claims to have been born in the North Sea and is the crown prince. The boy tells the girl to look into his eyes. Then she will see who he really is. But when the young lady looks into them, she sees a dragon and is very frightened. The girl realizes that he is human. She pulls back a little and realizes that he is one of the all-powerful guardians. The brunette says he hopes they scared the young lady, and the girl thinks maybe she is just dreaming it all. She asks why Harrion came to her, and the guy says it's all because she's destined for him by fate. And he's been waiting for her for so long. The young lady realizes that somehow she so easily believed his words despite her fear. She realizes that someone who is not human and is capable of magic has been waiting for her for years. The lady with white hair asks if he wants to take her, and adds in his thoughts to tie his life to her. The guy claims that he will do it any time she is ready, and the girl thinks that she wanted to be anywhere but in this mansion. So she holds out her arms and asks the young man to take her from there to his world. The guy makes her blush a little, and then hugs the girl. Hae-ryong apologizes and says he should have asked her to think it over, but he can't help it. The girl thinks that since he really, really needs her so much, then she's willing to sacrifice everything she has now because she wants to be with him and also be happy. That afternoon, Nira Del Myers disappeared from the human world without a trace. A little while later, the boy brought her to his parents. The servants look at the girl with warning. The crown prince claims that this girl is destined for him by fate, and everyone knows perfectly well how long he has been waiting to meet her. The emperor says that of course they do, and it has disturbed them greatly. The young man turns to his majesty. His father says that he will not say anything else because it is not in his authority. His mother tells her favorite son that the emperor is very worried about him, and the prince's chosen one will become the next empress of the North Sea, so she will have to forget about her human life. The protagonist is a little shocked by this, and the woman goes on and says that this world, the palace and the subjects, all of it will become her care and responsibility. The woman says she blesses them and grants this girl the title of crown princess following his majesty's wishes. The protagonist and her future husband bow, and the brunette thanks his majesty. A little while later, when they are on their way out of the imperial palace, the young man claims that Nira has held up well. The young lady asks if he thinks so, and Hae-ryong says he's sure. But the young lady doesn't think the others will agree with him. Then the guy puts his hand on her head. From this, the protagonist gives vent to her feelings, and tears roll from her eyes. The girl claims that she was actually a little scared and felt like she was doing everything wrong. The guy claims that she was just still very young and living a human life, so it's no wonder she was scared. But he says that the young lady will learn everything. Then the girl agrees. But soon, the young lady learned how terrible life awaited her. And now, more than 100 years have passed since the dark dragon prince brought a mere mortal as his chosen one. One of the servants tells Her Majesty it's time to go, but the girl claims she's not going. The servants are shocked by this and ask what she is saying and how she will understand it. The protagonist only asks what she says is incomprehensible to her, because even the late emperor did not consider her a legitimate daughter-in-law, and she only spares her unfortunate subjects the misery of bowing down to her. Moreover, isn't it a great humiliation to greet the honored guests unworthy of their presence? The maid sighs and asks Her Highness who dares to discuss her, for everyone in the world knows that she is the matriarch of the North Sea Palace. The protagonist says that of course the whole world knows of this humiliation. The maid cries out and asks why Her Highness is being stubborn on such an important day. Nira, however, realizes that the pathetic man they hate with all their soul, and now the second ruler of the dark dragon world. She was well aware that the servants and guards of the palace did not accept her as their empress. The maid only cries out that Her Highness should behave in accordance with her status, and the young lady realizes that she is now sitting silently listening to her own servant in an orderly tone demanding that she behave like an empress. The young lady recalls how the prince to her this servant girl, he claimed it was his close and trusted friend Yeryun. The guy claimed that this girl will be with Nira and will help in case of need. He trusts her the most, so he is not afraid to leave the young lady with her. But the protagonist realized that for Yeryun the most important thing was only her lord. And of course she is not happy that their empress is a worthless person, because it tarnished his reputation. The protagonist says that even if she shows all her dignity, she will not get respect. She states that she is sure that nothing will change. The young lady realizes that the maid, treating her with contrived respect, did not even perceive her as an hereditary princess. The girl has spent 100 years in a palace where everyone despises her. Yeryun only asks Her Highness what her subjects will think when they see the emperor without his consort and why the girl is showing her selfishness now. The maid asks her to come to her senses. The protagonist only thinks about what selfishness she is talking about, and of course the maid will blame her for everything. But the girl realizes that it doesn't matter what she does or doesn't do at all, and whether she makes an effort or loses her hands. She is always guilty of something, and even if she listens and shows up, none of the people present me almost from her presence. Nira says she causes trouble and shows selfishness, but those who say nasty things behind her back are not guilty of anything. She thanks the maids for another useful lesson, then angrily tosses the book aside. The maids are shocked by this and cover their heads with their hand in fear. And the young lady only walks past the maids. Walking down the corridor, the protagonist hears whispers. One of the men says that their emperor is a great dark dragon, but he chose a wife among mere mortals, which has blackened the imperial family, and history repeats itself. Nira does not know what to do now. The girl thought that everything will get better as soon as she gets used to the new unfamiliar environment. But it doesn't seem so anymore because 100 years have passed. A young man sees his wife and turns to her. He says that Eunbi is especially beautiful today. The girl realizes that this guy is the only reason. She can't give up on him. The subjects of the Almighty Guards watched with a stern look at the pathetic man that dared to stand subjects of the Almighty Guards. And the protagonist, as always, was silent by her side. That same evening, the young lady sits in her room. She hears the maids passing by, whispering amongst themselves. One of them says, "I thought they would fall into disgrace and how stubborn their mistress is." Another girl says she's the reason the palace is in turmoil, and her colleague says of course she is. Then the third maid asks when calm will prevail there. The protagonist just curls up into a dollop, wondering if the maids think she still doesn't understand their Oriental dialect. But she has been in the palace for a century. Then the emperor enters the room. He approaches the protagonist and says that she must be a statue. The girl is not delighted with this. She realizes that at some point his endless love became a burden to her, and the girl became disgusted with his feelings and actions, which she could no longer bear. Haeryong asks the young lady if something has happened, and the girl says that she's not sure she can continue to handle everything. She clenches her fists and thinks that since she was different from the inhabitants of this world, she thought that if she changed, all her problems would be solved. The brunette only says that the era of their rule has begun. He kisses the young lady on the forehead and tells her not to worry, because he will be with her forever. The protagonist realizes that 100 years have passed and wonders if this is just the beginning. Nira wonders how long it will last and whether she will be able to endure it all. Her eyes close, and the last thing she sees is Hae-young screaming in terror for her to wake up. When the young lady opens her eyes, the first thing she sees is this old woman. She claims to turn back time and give the young lady a chance to start a new life. She claims that the young lady has finally decided what she wants. The old woman takes her hand in hers and tells the protagonist to tell her what she wants. The next time Nira opens her eyes, she sees her maid in front of her. The maid asks if the mistress has spent the whole night reading again. The protagonist asks Kitty a little in shock, or is it? And then turning around and looking at the book realizes she is home again. The maid asks if this book is another novel about the protagonist's rebirth. Nira replies that it is, and the maid asks if the heroine is living her life anew with Romanoff, fundamentally changing everything. The protagonist asks how the heat maid knows all this. Schotten says that in the past, the heroine Romanoff was betrayed by her lover, and now she is avoiding him, but they will probably meet anyway. Then Nira asks if the maid has read this novel too, but the girl says that it is not necessary because all the novels with rebirth are the same. The maid asks if there isn't a certain naivete in them, in all those returns and regrets. The girl says it's unnatural because at first the characters act like children, but as they grow up, they will become obsessed and won't let go of the past. Noticing the look of her mistress, the maid says that, of course, this is only her opinion. But the young lady only turns around and says that she agrees with the maid, and then asks what the maid thinks of the weekly toilet cleaning. She is now Nira Del Myers, the stupid and worthless protagonist who is lucky enough to be reborn. Rebirths in all love stories are similar. First, there is a betrayal of the beloved, and then a tragic end. And the beginnings of all-consuming anger, a new case of the main heroine, the reason for rebirth is somewhat different. She couldn't even enjoy desserts in this horrible place. Harrion told her to forget about the meager human food because he raises her with much more delicious dishes. Nira, on the other hand, thinks that until she tasted the chocolate in her mouth on the day she returned to the past, she wouldn't have been able to fully realize that she was home again. The protagonist can't contain her smile at those sweets. The maid, on the other hand, turns to her mistress and says that she is addicted to the dessert. After the maid addresses her by name, who the protagonist realizes that she has already forgotten about this name. For a long time, people have called her Yunbi, a name bestowed upon her by the great emperor of the Dark Dragons, her husband, and for this reason, her real name has ceased to exist. Her father and mother died, and then Gradian suffered at the hands of a dark dragon. The young lady ran to her husband in tears and cried out that the boy was her younger brother. The boy, however, claimed that he was first and foremost a human being and had been punished for his sins. She was shocked at this. Then the boy hugged her and said he understood everything. He also apologized for causing fear to brew in Unbi's heart. However, he claims that everything he does, who does for her sake, and the young lady realizes that she was also a human being. Now the girl thinks that no matter how much she deceived herself, that she does not feel hatred for him. He thought in a special way but sincerely loved her. But this time she wants to live this life on her own as Nira, not his sweet Unbi. The girl keeps eating sweets and thinks that it's still a year until she meets Hae-young and she needs to get ready. However, besides that, there was another problem. She remembers very well what a rebellious lady she was, and how much trouble she had caused in her family in her past life, and now that, after passing a century, she was back to her old life again. 16-year-old Nira found herself bedridden for a week due to a fever that suddenly overcame her. And when the young lady came to her senses, she became completely different. When the girl drinks tea at the table, her mother sighs. She almost faints and says what a beautiful manner her daughter has. Nira tells her mother that if she is not feeling well, why don't she rest until the evening? The woman almost faints again and asks if the young lady called her mother. The girl, on the other hand, wonders if she said the wrong thing again. The woman only asks her husband if he is dreaming at all, but he replies that he doesn't even know. The maid whispers in her mistress's ear to behave as usual, and the girl thinks it's easy to say but hard to do. The father asks if his daughter is okay, and the girl replies that she is fine and apologizes for making her worry. The blonde man then says that he tried to apply for her admission to Athelin Academy, but so far, nothing has worked out. The main character, on the other hand, sighs and says that she didn't even think her father was worried about her wanting to apply to that academy. The man cries out that it's not like that. The young lady doesn't understand what's wrong, and her father says she should be outraged and stomping her feet and throwing whatever comes to hand to protest. And it's not that he directly wants his daughter to get angry or claim that it's all Igrain's tricks, because he would never allow her to say such things. The young lady asks why he mentioned her mother, but the man only shrieks, when did Igrain become her mother? For the girl had never called her so before and was adamant in her decision. But he adds that of course he does not say it is wrong to call her mother. The father calms down a little and says that although his daughter's behavior today is praiseworthy, but he hurriedly reminds her that there is a week left before the entrance exams and asks if she is sure that she will have time to prepare. After all, her cousin is the first in his class, but he studied for 5 years. The protagonist only calmly tells her father that she can handle it. The man, only a little with anger, says that he has nothing to do, except to put up with the stubbornness of his daughter, but if from her actions will suffer the reputation of their family. The girl only interrupts them and picks up her mug of tea and says that she will let Graydon be the next head of the family. The parents are surprised by this, but the girl continues and says that she doesn't want to become the heiress of the Myers family. She claims that they deserve to be the successor of their family and thinks that her father is of the same opinion because Gradian is much more suitable for this role. And because of her stubbornness, he is forced to live on another estate instead of living with them. The protagonist says to guide him out of there and provide him with the knowledge he needs and surround him with the care he deserves. After all, she is no longer going to resist all this. Her father, on the other hand, wonders how it is that her attitude towards Gradian and Igrain has changed in just one night. He immediately hugs his daughter and thinks that finally so not back feelings. The man asks him to apologize and claims that it was so hard for the girl, but she has become so attentive. And although for 10 years she did not want to learn, and also they changed 36 teachers, but he has to tell all those who think she is their biggest headache that they are wrong. Nira, on the other hand, thinks that she seems to have really caused trouble this time. For a little while later, there was a commotion at Myers Manor. All the maids were gossiping about the fact that now the young lady has covenanted with her mother, and she even changed their favor and allowed to bring her master there, and now she is going to enter the academy as well. They claim that the lady has indeed changed. A little while ago, Nira was an unruly lady rebel who did whatever she wanted. But on top of that, the way she treated Gradian made everyone else fearful. The girl would yell at her brother to shut his rotten mouth and ask who was his sister here. But Gradian was the only one who wasn't the least bit afraid of her. He loved his sister with all his heart. The boy wondered if Nira had always lived like this. It was the day her mother had died. That was when the mother boy had first entered the Myers family mansion. The woman told her son that his little sister had recently said goodbye to her birth mom, so they should understand her feelings and help. But before the boy could make a promise to himself, he was already touched to the core just by seeing his beautiful older sister. He vowed that he would protect her for the rest of his life. When the boy returns to the mansion, he runs into his sister's room in shock. The girl only turns to him and calls his name. The boy realizes that he entered the room without knocking and says that he didn't mean to. He closes his eyes, expecting his sister to get angry and hit him again. But the girl only says that from now on he must ask permission to enter her room. Gradian is shocked by this, and the young lady asks what happened. The guy walks up to her and excitedly tells her that he heard about her going to join the academy. But a couple of days ago she was sick, so the young lady needs to take care of her own health. The protagonist, in response to this, only keeps silent, and the boy says that she just hated the thought of studying, but the girl claims that she changed her mind. Then her brother argues that she herself said that this place is made for nerds and those who nothing else to do but study. And the young lady says that it just so happens that she has nothing else to do. The boy, with tears in his eyes, says that it's a whole 5 years of confinement, and the young lady will have to live in the student dormitory. The young lady thinks that she has a good reason for that, too, because she mustn't meet Har Yong. The young lady realizes that the Imperial Athelin Academy is the most prestigious educational institution in the whole empire, and the most advanced scientific institute of the empire is located there. Children of wealthy families from different continents do their best to enter the academy there every year is characterized by a particularly high admission rate. The academy is also notorious for the fact that students are not allowed to leave its walls for all 5 years of study. Blondin comes to the conclusion that it's all because of him. He clenches his fists and asks if his sister hates him to such an extent. And at that very moment, Nira was flooded with memories from her distant past. Back then, the young man cries out that it was all her fault and asks how dare the girl come there now. The young lady realizes that she will never forget that cry of despair and the fear that she might see those hate-filled eyes again. The girl doesn't want history to repeat itself, and the guy at this time gets up from the table. He walks to the door and says a little sadly that even so, he's still sad that the girl is leaving. The main character doesn't say anything back, and when the boy leaves, she puts her hand on her head and sighs. The girl says that the young man is really stumping her, and the boy in the meantime sits down under the door on the hallway. He thinks he should have told his sister something important, and also asks himself how many times he called her by name. But then he wonders with a smile if that means the girl has opened her heart a little bit to him. A little while later, Nira and her maid are riding in a carriage. The maid says that she has heard that the entrance exams to the academy are extremely difficult, and then asks if the mistress is not going to prepare at least a little, because the girl only eats sweets. The protagonist only asks Kichi if she knew that sweets improve the blood circulation of the brain. In fact, sweets have no effect on the blood circulation in the brain, and the brain only feeds on glucose, which is contained in sweets, but everything must be in moderation. The young lady tells her maid to consider that it is such a preparation, and it is important to prepare her own body as well. The girl eats another cookie and thinks how delicious it is. She ponders if something could taste so amazing. Nira also wonders if she should have taken another box for the return trip, but one of the servants turns to her and states that they have arrived at Athelin Academy. The young lady gets out of the carriage and says that it has finally happened. The girl realizes that once she gets there, everything will change, and their meeting with Heron will not happen. The young lady realizes that this is why she cannot delay, because that past must not happen again. At this time, the first prince of the empire, Salbridman Salbrid, is playing chess and asks how many of those trying to enter can impress him. He states with a smile on his face that he is already tired of looking for someone to do it. His friend then asks if he is tired of asking the same question every year. This is the eldest son of the Arsian family, Christopher Arsian. The crown prince asks if his friend is jealous, but the young man only says with a serious expression on his face that he is not. The prince approaches him and tells him not to worry, because he only has him. The boy is already disgusted, but bends over backwards and says that he strongly disagrees with His Highness. The guy, on the other hand, states that he heard that Christopher's sister is entering this year. The brunette, however, grabs him by the shoulder and tells him that he strongly advises him not to show any interest in her. He looks at his friend in silence and then says that he thinks the crown prince has relaxed because Prince Shade is already getting people together. The young man asks if his friend is serious now, and the brunette says that's what he heard at the academy, and the walls have ears. The prince says that's not good, though it's what I've come to expect from his worthless little brother. Christopher claims that many people assume that His Highness turns a blind eye to it, but the young man argues that this is not true at all, for he has given his brother plenty of time to drop the matter. After all, small fish are always released back into the water because it is too small to eat and finish it off just so miserable. But a good fisherman never misses his catch. The brunette thinks that someone missed his chance to catch a big fish, and moreover, it is the Athelin Academy, where representatives of noble families from all continents gather. Christopher says that he is sure His Highness understands what he is getting at, and he states about the factions that will form within these walls. The young man with silver hair replies that political strife is far from a game of chess. He who is at the bottom must stay there, and those who have risen cannot afford to fall. And what's more, Origin plays a big role there, and he's so desperate that he's doing it on his own. The brunette says it's better than doing nothing. And the crown prince says that he has Christopher, and would rather be left with one big fish than catch small fish. The young man says that His Highness flatters him, but he has already made up his mind to follow the capable leader, even though he has his faults. And his inferiority complex is at the center of it all. Then His Highness asks if it's about him, and the guy claims that it is. And anyway, something interesting is coming up. He goes to the window and claims that the young lady must be somewhere nearby, because today, Lady Myers is taking the entrance exams. The Crown Prince is shocked and asks if that girl is his friend's cousin. The brunette only asks if the prince didn't know that, but His Highness claims he didn't, and so the Lady Rebel joins them. He sits down on a chair and claims that the Margrave is no fool. The lad believes he will make his youngest son heir, or already has. But whatever the reason, the key figure of the neutral faction is already there, and Shade must have a lot of things to do. People have called the imperial throne of Selbird a purple grave. After all, anyone who has imperial blood flowing in them and is able to finish off their rival has a chance of success besides their closest family ties. And now there are two princes fighting for the right to sit on the throne, Edmund and Shade Selbird. Christopher puts the book aside and says that since the factions supporting the Crown Prince are now on the same level, it is necessary to deal with the representatives of neutrality. And the Myers family is known for their talented diplomats, so if the prince can convince that family, they will join neutrality. The young man with silver hair says with a smile that they will do it, but they will only be able to do it if the lady passes the exams. He wonders if the infamous lady has even the slightest chance of getting into the academy. Meanwhile, the protagonist continues to eat desserts. A little while later, the stepmother of the young lady says that she is very worried about the results and should have prayed for her admission. The protagonist doesn't know what she means, and the woman tearfully says that she is so sorry that the girl is leaving. The young lady claims that it is only for 5 years, but the woman only says that she is already sad. After all, it is only worth thinking that the daughter will be there all alone to overcome the difficulties. The girl tells her mother that she is not going to war, but only to study. The woman says that she thought that they have become closer. The young lady thinks it's strange, but she can't remember why she hated these people so much in the past. Maybe it was because they weren't blood relatives, or maybe it was because she was afraid they would take her father away from her. The girl wrings her hands and realizes that her mom cares so much about her, and even after all the nasty things she did. So the protagonist asks why the woman is so kind to her, and the lady with red hair claims that it is because the girl is her daughter. She states that the young lady may not treat her like her own mother, but she asks Nira to remember that she is as dear to her as her son Grady is to her. She tells Nira to tell her if she has any difficulties. After all, the woman will always help her. The protagonist doesn't even know what to say to that, but suddenly a maid bursts into the room. She cries out that they have a problem with the academy because Lady Nira. The protagonist looks at her stepmother, who looks back at her. A little while later, Nira's father cries out to be told to calm down after all the nonsense he has said. He then orders the men to leave and leave his house immediately. One of them asks Mr. Myers to calm down and think things through. After all, he should think about his family's reputation, but the blonde man only tells them to leave now. Then the other man says that they are here to sort things out and won't leave until they see the lady. At this time, the main character and her stepmother walk into the room. The woman asks if they can come in. Everyone present is a little shocked by this. The woman only says that her husband made the guests stand around and didn't even offer them tea. She asks Phalias what people might think, and of course they will have a bad opinion of their family. The woman then puts her arm around Nira and asks what they wanted to talk to her daughter about. A little while later, the protagonist is already sitting with a cup of tea. She remembers her conversation with her stepmother. The woman told her not to get discouraged, because they will show these ingrates who they messed with. Now, sitting at the table, the guests ask if they can continue. One of them asks the lady not to be intimidated, but the young lady has successfully passed the entrance exams. The woman is pleasantly surprised by this. She rejoices and tells her daughter that this is good news. After all, she was able to get in. But one of the guests asks what good means and says that the lady is much more naive than she looks. After all, the girl got the highest score for an assignment that no one could have handled in the entire history of Athelin Academy. And the lady got a top score on every assignment. Nira is a little shocked by this, and the guy continues. He asks if the lady is surprised, because if she is, it's a given. Since she has achieved everything on her own, she is not familiar with the complexity of the exams. But it is obvious that the lady was helped by someone. The woman from these words already renounces anger. Then she holds out a fan to this guest and asks how dare he make such insulting speeches. The guy falls backwards in horror, but the woman continues and says that she hopes he has enough evidence for that. And he knows that cheating on exams is as difficult as the exams themselves. Nira is approached by her father and says that her mother used to want to be a knight. The young lady asks if this is true, and the blonde man claims that she is from the Cardinal family, which is widely known for its knights. The other guests are shocked and say that they just assume that someone from the exam board gave Hay the answers, because after all, they are the Myers family. The young lady's father is shocked by this. He says that in other words, the guests want to say that he facilitated her admission, and then cries out whether they have decided to insult everyone in their family today. But one of the men then jumps up from his seat and asks him to explain it all and convince him otherwise. After all, how did their rebel lady manage to do so well in her exams? The girl, however, now sits back and realizes that the top score was not for one assignment. She thinks she should have been a little more restrained. Meanwhile, the guest argues that the lady he knows would hardly have been able to pass the exams at all. And surely she had the answers. The young lady only looks at him with a cold stare. She realizes that the man is now talking about the past Lady Myers, but the protagonist stumbled upon a book with a familiar language quite by accident in her past life. After reading her native Eastern literature, she was relieved to see the text in her native language. The girl was thrown into an abyss of nostalgia and regret, and eventually made it a habit to open and read it every day. Hae-young asked if she was reading the book again, since it had been 100 years, and it wasn't time to read something else. But the girl claimed that it was just a hobby of hers. Now she realizes that she has been reading this book for 100 years, and the questions in the assignments were very simple and had only one correct answer. But the young lady does not understand how to explain it all, because she would not even believe herself. The protagonist sighs, and her mother turns to Sir Nazalan and says that she must admit that there is some truth in his words. She points to her daughter and claims that the way he called her a lady rebel is true. After all, the girl really used to be like that. Nazalan chuckles and says that he did not doubt the wisdom of his mistress. But the woman interrupts him and says that, however, children grow and change, and it is not all the life of the eldest daughter of the Myers family to be a lady rebel. The father says that's right, and it's not like she's going to cause them trouble forever. The girl realizes with a smile that her parents believe in her, and also realizes that this is the time for action. The protagonist approaches Sir Nazalan and asks if he is willing to take responsibility for his words and swear on his family's honor. The guest immediately cries out what kind of blatant insolence this is, and asks how he can be so confident. And the young lady says she wants to ask the Count the same thing, for how can he be so sure that someone helped her? The young lady says that if he asks, she will say that whoever made up these assignments is a patriot. After all, question 57 says that the volunteer unit that took part in the Battle of Platanium had an error. During the Second Continental War, the Salbrid army forced the civilians of Platania to join them. All the guests are shocked by this, and the protagonist goes on and says that of course volunteer unit sounds better, but asks if they thought it would be suitable for an exam that people come from other continents for. The protagonist states that she could also list many other errors, and this, for example, could be question 71. Article 24 of the Common Law, which they used as an example, acted to amend it and of course had nothing to do with the correct answer. The girl claims that she could have gone on, but she is interrupted by one of the guests and cries out that definitely someone gave her the answer. The girl asks how someone who is known as a lady rebel could have been given such a thing. And on top of that, for an assignment that's full of mistakes, even though it's an entrance exam for the Athelin Academy. It's even embarrassing for her to get the highest score for something like this, because it's wrong from the very beginning. The guests are very hurt by this, and they cry out what a cheeky girl she is. And the young lady only says that if necessary, she will gladly perform an additional task. And from their side, she expects to see the right questions. A little while later, the maid reads a newspaper. It says that the academy has been forced to revise all the scores of the incoming students, and everyone in the paper is talking about Mistress. Kitty also claims that Mrs. Charlotte, who is the editor-in-chief for the first time, praised someone. The main character, on the other hand, is busy baking sweets and says she doesn't care much about it. And the maid asks the mistress, isn't that a good thing because you can remember how rude these people were to her? Nira only says that they were right about something. And the young lady realizes what she is used to being. She has always been a headache for the Myers family. She tells the maid that she is only interested in one thing and asks why no one has ever told her off or told her off. And also for what reason everyone turned a blind eye to her behavior. The maid only says it was for Nira's sake. The girl is shocked and asks what she means. And the maid claims that the whole estate knew about the rumor. The protagonist asks, what rumor? The maid asks if her mistress remembers it, and then claims that everyone just wanted her to live life to the fullest because her mother passed away and she immediately had a stepmother as well as a stepbrother. But the protagonist tells her maid to get to the point. The maid is a little unsure if it's worth telling. And the girl claims that everything is fine and let Kitty tell her. Then the Schotten girl claims that because of the mistress's mother, the engagement was broken. The engagement between her father and Mistress Igraine. Nira is shocked by this. She realizes that her father did not hand over her mother, the maid, and supports her mistress, and says she knew this would happen, because the girl had the same face when she first heard about it, and she cried all night while Kitty was with her. The young lady only thinks she hated her father for bringing a mistress into the house even before her mother passed away. And she always looked down on her when the woman acted like a Margravine, but in reality was only a miserable mistress. But in reality, it was not like that, because the native mother of the protagonist ruined the life of two lovers and even gave birth to a child, and then died suddenly. Now the girl understands why without her, they would have had a very happy life, and all because the young lady was afraid of losing her only place. Nira did all this so that she would not be forgotten now the girl realizes everything. After all, before that, she only did what she did to destroy everything with her own hands. A little time later, she and her family go on a carriage. Her father asks if Nira wants to go with them, but the girl only asks what he's talking about because they're almost there for the initiation ceremony. The blonde says that his daughter understands perfectly well that he is talking about something else, and she must. But then Igraine tells her husband to watch his tone. The father then states that he is asking Nira about traveling to the great eastern continent. After all, it is a place where the sun never sets. And this country is also known for its thousands of years of culture. The emperor sends his delegation to see for themselves. And since their family has been renowned diplomats for many years, this would be a good opportunity. The young lady realizes it is indeed a good opportunity. An opportunity to turn her entire family to dust under her feet. In hindsight, she didn't hesitate to accept his offer. Tired and lonely, she wanted to get away from there, and it was on the eastern continent that she met Heron. The young lady realizes how stupid she is, because that's what caused the tragedy. But with a smile on her face, she wishes her relatives a good trip. The parents are touched by this. They hug their daughter. Graydon also runs up to his sister and asks if he can write sheets. The protagonist tells him to do as he wishes and asks you to take care, then heads to the academy. Igraine says she has a strange feeling, and the woman keeps thinking that the girl sacrificed something for them, and that is something very important to her. But she hopes that her daughter will be okay. At this time at the academy, the students are sitting around the table. A young lady with green hair admires Mr. Arsien. She says that his confidence attracts looks and also his charisma, and not saying much. The girl asks why they still haven't started the ceremony. The red-haired boy next to her says he doesn't know because the crown prince, that is the president of the student council, isn't here yet. The guy claims that he may have been urgently summoned, but suddenly one man shrieks again whether the guy is gone. He also shrieks that the student council president only knows how to hang around. Christopher then says he'll go and look for him because he doesn't think the guy is far away. The man claims that it's just unthinkable and asks to say that he's the only one missing. Well, suddenly the maid protagonist turns over with a tray and tearfully states that her mistress is not there either. 2 hours before Nira disappeared, she and the maid were treading the hallway. Kitty thought she couldn't believe she was now Lady Nera's personal maid. She thought that she would do her best, and no one would dare to say nasty things about her lady. And she will also try very hard to make the lady open her heart to her. But suddenly the protagonist stops, and the maid crashes into her. Kitty asks if the lady hurt herself, and the girl only looks at the gossiping people around, all saying that this is the famous Lady Myers, who got the highest score in the entrance exams. But among these people, there is one very unhappy with this girl. The protagonist thinks that it is somehow embarrassing for her to pass by all of them. The girl didn't think she would attract so much attention. She tells her maid that she has an errand for her, as her personal maid. Kitty is embarrassed by this. She cries out for her mistress to give her orders, and she will do it. Nira says she's glad to hear that, and then asks if the maid can find her the quietest place in the capital. And when she has time, then let her find out about the kitchen at the academy, for she needs to make a plan to eat sweets for the week. She also tells Kitty not to forget and to bring a handful. The maid asks in shock if the lady wants to be left alone. Then the young lady points her finger to one place and says she will sit there for now, where it is quiet and peaceful, and where she will wait for the maid. The maid says that this is what the lady told her, but she does not understand where the hot girl has disappeared to. At the same time, the crown prince, walking in the garden, sneezes. He says that he seems to have a cold, and he also hopes that Chris is not too angry, but he thinks that he cannot worry about it because it is such a beautiful day and beautiful view. So it's a great time to skip school and have some fun. He looks up at one of the trees and thinks taking a nap in the shade is not a bad idea. But then he sees that someone is already there. The guy says that whoever dared to rest there must be an ignorant freshman, and he'd better be ready to pay. But then he doesn't finish the sentence and is surprised by what he sees. There is a girl lying under the tree. The crown prince realizes that Nera Del Myers has ashy hair in this empire. He puts his hand on her head and thinks he won't let the girl go this time. But a little while later, Christopher is already furiously yelling at the prince. He asks if the guy is out of his mind because he allows himself to skip classes. The young man asks if it was so difficult to sit silently at the initiation ceremony. The prince only asks his friend to calm down, and the brunette still angrily asks if he is like the one who is ready to calm down, because he should have a sense of responsibility as the president of the student council. Now Christopher realizes why the prince asked him to give the welcome speech. He shrieks that he's wasting his time with the president, and they tell Chris to watch his words. But then the brunette can't hold back and asks if the asshole even knows how much he's had to decide everything for him. The green-haired lady and her friend are watching all of this. They realize that it turns out these two are pretty close. The crown prince then asks who these guys are. The two then introduce themselves. The girl claims her name is Rebecca Dillis, and the guy says his name is Cedric Hackendroff. The prince doesn't understand at first and says he's heard those names somewhere, but then a realization comes to him and he asks if these two are second in line for admission. He then asks what they're doing next to a jerk like Chris. The brunette, on the other hand, cries out that the young man is being sought after, and the dean has asked to find them both. The protagonist wakes up at this time and tells them to be quiet, and Brené realizes that this is another headache for him. He turns to Nera Del Myers and says that he had high expectations about her when he heard the news. But the girl has not had time to arrive and has already caused a stir. The protagonist only asks if they know each other. Then the guy asks in shock if she even recognizes her cousin. The girl only looks at him and tries to recognize him. The crown prince can't hold back his laughter. He says that Chris turns out to be not so famous among the family. Nera only asks if the guy is her cousin. She realizes he is the one who has been at the academy all this time, and then asks if he happens to be the cousin who tried 5 times to get into the academy. The guy is embarrassed by this and doesn't even know what to say. Nera remembers that Christopher Arsian is a confidant of the crown prince of the Salbrid Empire. He is the first in the ranking of incoming students at Athelin Academy and comes from a noble family known throughout the empire. He is also the treasurer of the student council, radiating power and charisma, and the object of admiration of many female students of the academy. But even a successful man like Christopher has a past that he would like to hide. The boy wonders if his cousin is being bullied now. He already wants to say something to her, but the prince closes his mouth. He just laughs and says that it turns out their treasurer has anger control issues. And maybe he's just glad he met his cute cousin, and the girl doesn't understand who this guy is. She wonders what he is snickering about, disturbing her sleep, and asks where are the young man's manners. Petya, he should have at least apologized. The guy continues to snicker and says that before he apologizes, he should first learn one thing, because this place belongs to him. The protagonist says she doesn't see his name there yet, and the young man says that's for now. Then Nira says that he has proclaimed the place to be his, which is available to everyone, and that's kind of childish. The maid, on the other hand, comes running to her mistress and says that this is the student council president and crown prince of the empire, and then says that they don't have much time after all, and the initiation ceremony is about to begin. Christopher adds that it starts in 5 minutes, so they should hurry. The young man with silver hair asks if the girl will go. The protagonist rises from her seat and says that she was going to go on her own. And in her thoughts, she adds that she will do it just as she plans to change her own fate. And finally, the cogwheel of fate began to turn. At this time in the palace of the Dark Dragon, the ruler of the Northern Sea, there was a grand celebration. Within the palace walls, an heir was born, blessed by the Dark Dragon himself, and after 3 days of long labor. The Emperor of the North Sea bestowed upon his son the name Haryong. He claimed that the baby would surely be the next ruler. After all, the heavens themselves had blessed him. The guardian prophet must look into the future and tell them who will deliver him. Well, the one is a little silent. Then the emperor asks why the one is delaying, and the prophet says he is sorry, but he has come with bad news. After all, the one destined to the prince by fate is born in another world, and to make his future happy, he must find his destiny when she reaches a certain age. Everyone was a little shocked at this. The maids began to whisper and speculate that the girl would be a miserable man once, at whom their kind hated the most. For a long time more, the inhabitants of the Dark Dragon Palace tried to recover from the shock, but the prophecy was destined to come true. The prince grew up and became stronger, and his image became fit to be the heir to the throne. At this time, 2 sailors were talking amongst themselves. One of them claimed that a ship from the west had arrived. They were relatives of the protagonist. The father was telling his son to get off the ship carefully and not to hurt himself, and also the boy should not wander to unknown places. The boy told his father not to worry and claimed that he was also curious about something. He says he remembers in the books he read about the Eastern continent it was said that its inhabitants have dark hair and eyes, but many people are no different from them, and his father replies that it's because the Han Empire, of all the states in the Eastern continent, is the closest to the Western Sea. And due to years of trade cooperation, many people have moved from one empire to another. We indigenous people live far away from the sea and are very different from them. Those with dark hair, but suddenly the father interrupts his story because he sees that his son is distracted. But the young man only sees the boy with dark hair. Then the blond man speaks his son's name a little louder and asks him what he was looking at. The boy replies that he thought he saw something, and it was probably just a shadow. The father, on the other hand, states that he told his son not to relax, and then they continue on their way. At this time, the maid turns to His Highness. She asks what the Lord is looking at. The same takes off his cloak and says that he seems to have found something, but he could be wrong. The guy looks very tired. He doesn't understand where the one destined for him is. The maid, on the other hand, is a little shocked. She immediately pulls the hood back over the lad and tells him that His Highness needs to hide his face because this is not their world and they should be extremely careful. The young man just pushes her hand away and claims that enough is enough, then asks if that's why they used the masking charms. Pani states that there is no need to worry about anyone seeing them. He clutches his cloak and says he wants to meet his fate soon. The girl, on the other hand, realizes that since they came to the other world, more than a year has passed in search of His Highness's chosen one. If the prophecy doesn't lie, it's already time. But the girl thinks she wishes he could not find his destiny. The maid tells His Highness not to be upset. Again, they and their destiny will surely meet. 2 years later, in Adeline Academy, everyone is doing their own things. The protagonist and her friend were walking down the corridor. The girl with green hair says that Christopher must be very proud, and she had no idea that Lady Beatrice would be the next Estelle. Nira asks if it's not obvious. Estelle is Latin for star. The protagonist says you've had 3 generations in their family get the name Estelle. It was Beatrice. Christopher's younger sister. She got it as soon as she was admitted. This name every year got to the girl who was the most successful in the academy and everyone who ever received this title in the academy. After her graduation, successfully established themselves in the high society of the empire, but no one had such high expectations. As Beatrice Arcian. Her mother was a countess and her grandmother a duchess, and they are among the best bearers of the Estelle title. Nira says that Beatrice is the youngest lady among those who have been given the title Estelle, and she doubts there is anyone more deserving than this girl. The lady with green hair says she thinks the vice president is more worthy. The protagonist turns around and asks who the girl is talking about, and then the green-haired lady states that she's talking about Nira. The young lady neck realizes that somehow she happens to be among the student council members as vice president, all because of an annoying prince. The young lady with green hair asks if Nira realizes how popular she is among the other students. After all, she always stands her ground with her teachers and shows her pride by not skimping on her expressions even when talking to the prince. And one fine day, Nira was accosted by several girls. They told the young lady to stop flirting simply because she is beautiful, smart, and capable. And another girl claimed that if Nira continued to behave like this, they would take action. The girls ask if the young lady knows who they are. The protagonist only says with a smile that these ladies are so cute, and she wishes she had a daughter like her. The girls are shocked by this, and the young lady goes to hug them. The main character is told that it must be hard to talk to the boys they like, and it's terribly awkward. But the feeling is stronger, because although their indifference hurts, but the girls still continue to sigh about them. Let them hate to the very thought of unrequited love, but they cannot do anything about it. The blonde of such words gives vent to her feelings and tears roll from her eyes. The lady with white hair only says that these nasty boys hurt their feelings by not noticing such charming ladies. But it's okay because those feelings won't stay with them forever, so girls shouldn't take it personally. The green-haired lady says that after that day, all the girls made Nira their main idol. Discussing the fact that she possesses maternal care, many girls have concluded that she is wiser than their own mothers. The main character is surprised at first, and then thinks who would doubt it, as she has been living for over 100 years. The lady with green hair continues and says that's why everyone wants Nira to compete for Estelle's title, but the young lady only says she wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Rebecca, going after the vice president, thinks the girl is just bored with the whole thing, but she says that in any case, the academy will soon have a festival, and she hopes to be done with all the preparations. The protagonist states that she hopes they're done too. A little while later, she is sitting with the others in the study, but suddenly something gives her a shock. The girl asks about the emperor's edict. The young lady says that they are already busy with preparations for the festival, and they are also invited to the Foundation Day celebration. The prince says that they can't do anything about it, because the emperor's decree came so unexpectedly. He says that the girl understands that this is a celebration of the bicentennial since the founding of the empire, and that is why the emperor has issued a special decree, according to which the members of the student council of the academy must participate. And of course, not everyone is obliged to attend. Such words make Nira smile, and the guy adds that she is celebrating the founding of the empire. He will take Frederick and Nira. The protagonist is shocked by this and cries out, "Why take her?" After all, she has a lot of things to do, and wouldn't it be better to take Chris with her? His Highness claims that Chris will organize the festival. The protagonist realizes that it's true, but she doesn't agree. And the Crown Prince says that since everyone has plenty to do, their meeting has come to an end. After all this, the young lady sighs. She also says that she is already full of work and asks when she will find time for this too. Rebecca apologizes and says that a lot of things have accumulated. And Nira jumps up from her chair and says that she needs to eat a sweet and let the guys tell Kitty to prepare something. But suddenly, someone approaches the main character. It's a guy with blonde hair. He claims he heard the girl will represent the student council at the celebration in honor of the founding of the empire. The guy wonders what this wonderful coincidence is and asks if Nira would do him the honor of being there as his. The girl, on the other hand, thinks that when she entered the academy, she had only one goal, and that was to study diligently and to enjoy life. The young lady planned to continue in the same vein just to avoid being expelled. But her becoming the vice president of the student council changed everything, And it was all because she ran into the wrong person 2 years ago. In the books she happened to find in the North Sea Empire, she kept coming across one name, and that name was that of the new emperor, Edmund Salbrid. He was the ruler of the world's first empire to open official trade with the eastern continent, the heir to the current emperor who made his empire great. He was praised for starting the golden era of the Salbrid dynasty, and the full name of this great ruler was Edmund Rufus de Salbrid. The girl had no intention of getting close to him. But who would have thought that having barely severed ties with her chosen crown prince, she would find herself witnessing the rise of his majesty? The girl realizes that to maintain relations with him means to be involved in political strife, and the young lady only thinks about all this as immediately starts to get a headache. At least the girl thought so. But when she was eating sweets, her thoughts were no longer the same. The hereditary prince asks if Lady Nera is sure she doesn't want to become vice president, because if she agrees, the guy will give her unlimited access to desserts. The girl realizes that the young man bribed her with those damn desserts. And now, 2 years later, she turns 18. She is sure of only one thing, and that is that she was able to change her fate. Because instead of a life of Yunbi, she was able to start a life of Nera Del Myers. The girl says that if you think about it that way, she could even make a mark in history. As Nera Del Myers, the lady who changed destiny, that was her only goal. And there was no way the girl planned to get involved in the political bickering of those two idiots. The other prince is now asking if his brother is against the girl joining him. The protagonist only sighs and says that as a member of the student council, she should be treated with respect. But suddenly, Rebecca cries out for the boy to stop acting like that. The girl looks at him angrily and asks if the prince thinks it's rude to ask someone to accompany him in society. Well, the young man only approaches the girl and asks Rebecca if it is Rebecca, because if so, then he asks her to forgive him for not being able to fulfill all the formalities. But he states that he doesn't think it somehow excuses the young lady who has forgotten about them no less. The lady with green hair claims that she only asked as a student of the academy, and the prince just can't hold back a smile at such a thing. The protagonist wonders if he's laughing now. And the prince tells Rebecca that she's obviously dreaming, and he hopes the young lady doesn't think that she and Lady Nera occupy the same position in society. No doubt the Dillis family is widely known for its scholars, but he has heard that the girl's brother has been chosen as the heir. Therefore, the prince argues that Rebecca knows her place and calls her a worthless wench. The protagonist can't take it and tells Mr. Shade to watch his language. The guy asks if he was too rude and apologizes for hurting Lady Nera because he had no such thought. He then asks what the young lady's response will be, or if she will order him to continue waiting. He states that he would very much like Nera to keep him company at the celebration in honor of the day of the founding of the empire. The protagonist doesn't even know what to say to this. But suddenly, another lady enters the room. She apologizes to His Highness and says that it's a bit exciting, but she would like him to keep her company. The guy is a little embarrassed and surprised, and the protagonist wonders what the girl is doing there. The prince asks if Lady Estelle would like him to keep her company, and the lady with the red hair says that she doesn't know anything at all about Mr. Edmund, and obviously won't be able to call her brother along, so she says a little embarrassed that she wanted to ask His Highness, but asks if she's too late. The lad also says he's flattered that Lady Beatrice sought him out. After all, he and Nera were just finishing a conversation. He says the girl might ignore his recent proposal, and asks him to forgive him for the inconvenience caused. The protagonist is shocked by such a son with a strained smile, says that of course she will. The lady with red hair says that she should have invited the young man earlier, and thanks the girl for her understanding. She herself whispers that Nera will be me, and she should. The protagonist is a little shocked by this, thinking that the young lady has helped her. The girl asks if she can find out in what color clothes the prince plans to arrive at the celebration, because her outfit should match his. And the prince says that of course it does, and then says goodbye to Nera and Rebecca. The green-haired lady apologizes to the protagonist at this time, tearfully saying that she should not have interfered, and Nera only embraces her and says that the girl did nothing wrong, and she, on the contrary, wanted to say thank you for Rebecca standing up for her. She also says don't take the prince's words to heart. After all, he's not worth it at all. A little while later, the day of the celebration came. Two guys were walking around town. One of them said that the celebration in honor of the founding of the empire comes out grand, And his friend says that it is true, and in their empire came guests from all continents. So the guy looks at one of the carriages and asks where these people are from. But seeing the dark hair, they realize that they are probably from the eastern continent. The nobles are celebrating the day of the founding of the country, and the prince is walking under the arm of Beatrice. And the crown prince comes up to Nera and says that the celebration was great, and it's probably because this year is the bicentennial. The silver-haired boy says that this year His Majesty has done a great job, because along with the Foundation Day celebration, there is also a festival at the Academy. It's a total of 11 days of festivities, and it's tourist season in the capital. But the emperor needs something to show off to the arriving guests. To show them the grand scale of the Salbrid Empire, the protagonist says she hopes everything goes according to His Majesty's plan. The hereditary prince says that this is of course true and he would also succeed after a successful feast. But suddenly the guy notices that the music has changed. He realizes that it is slow dance music. So he extends his hand and asks if Nera will do him the honor. The young lady only asks suspiciously what he wants, and the guy is shocked and asks if he must have some personal motive to ask her to dance. The guy says that his brother enjoys Lady Estelle's company, so he can't just watch. The protagonist says that she is sure there are plenty of ladies besides her who would love to dance with him, and the guy says he needs it to look politically neutral. The protagonist puts down her glass and asks if that's all it is, and the guy replies that it will turn out to be no. He kisses the young lady's hand and claims he doesn't do that every day, and then the two start dancing. Everyone in the audience looking at the couple whispers and asks if this girl is the eldest daughter of the Myers family, and if the rumors are true, and the girl is really beautiful.